Right then, Manchester United, in the near decade since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, have appointed and sacked 4 permanent managers, as well as signing and letting go plenty of players who've had success pre and post their time at Manchester United. This, in combination with the many other apparent factors, suggests that the manager and the players themselves aren't really the root of the problem. And the problem lies in the structure of the football club. Since the takeover, the Glazers started spending way less in the transfer market, as well as drastically divesting the football club and investing actually nothing into the wider infrastructure of the club. When the Glazers joined, it was 4 years after the completion of Carrington, which at the time was a world-class training facility. Carrington has had a little bit of a cosmetic upgrade in recent years, and that's really it. It hasn't had any major structural work done to it for a very long time. And what was once the jewel in the crown of a Manchester United empire that oversaw everything as it did in 2001, now is like a pretty ordinary Premier League training ground. It's been overtaken by Spurs, by Leicester, by Arsenal, by Manchester City, by Chelsea, potentially by Liverpool, and actually potentially by many, many others. In 2005, Manchester United had a worldwide scouting and feeder club network, which included the likes of Gothenburg, Antwerp, and Fluminense over in Brazil. We also had a women's team in 2005, and the Glazers killed it, as well as the links with all of those clubs. Recently, the women's team has actually come back to life and has had a little bit of investment into it, but we also saw, perhaps one of the greatest managers in the game in Casey Stoney walking out because she wasn't feeling like she was getting the support that she deserved amidst the success that she was delivering on the pitch for Manchester United women. Due to the investment that happened prior to 2005, Manchester United saw a team come to the boil because of the work done 3-4 years previously. And this sort of really shines a light on the long-term planning of the football club coming to root later on. There's an old phrase which says, "Blessed are the old people who plant trees knowing they shall never sit in the shade of their foliage." And I think that's what happened 2000 to 2005. Or really, maybe even a little bit of a bleed over following that. Manchester United in that time signed young, hungry players. Wayne Rooney, Cristiano Ronaldo, Rio Ferdinand. Those were the core tenets of the team that became European champions 4 or 5 years later, 6 years later in some instances. The hard work of that team was sown way in advance. If you look at the starting 11 that featured in the Champions League final, look how many of those signings have been there for a long time. Look how many of those signings were homegrown, or players were homegrown. We saw like the ripple of our investments done earlier on. We saw the ripple of our structure yielding later down the line. And the last 10 years, Sir Alex retired, David Gill retired, and Ed Woodward took the helm. We rotted from the top down because we didn't have football experts running the football club. We became Disneyland. We became a content company. We forgot why people watch Manchester United. It is not because we make interesting content, because I would argue we don't. We make dramatic, romantic stories, and they can't be manufactured. They have to exist in reality on the pitch. Once our greatest ever manager retired, it was probably going to be an impossible task for the next manager. But the fact that our greatest ever manager retired and effectively vacated probably 3 roles in one when he retired, David Moyes was never going to be up to the task of matching one of those jobs, let alone the 3. Van Gaal came in and, except for it being boring, actually addressed a lot of the issues. Things like floodlights at Carrington. Talks about the lack of training culture in Manchester. Obviously, Sir Alex didn't feel the need to, and Louis did. But he was astounded. Now, this is a guy that's been at Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Ajax, all over the place, and was astounded at the lack of floodlights at our training ground. And to be honest, I am a little bit as well. Jose Mourinho came in, wanted certain things, didn't get them. Here's the thing with Mourinho. Mourinho's always a success when you give him what he wants. And when he doesn't get what he wants, he turns it toxic and burns the fucking house down. Ole probably steadied the ship, made the bunch a little bit more likeable, got back-to-back Champions League qualifications, and ultimately failed. They have been given money. But how much of the money that was spent wisely? How much of it was squandered? And you look at the Manchester derby last weekend, you look at the investment in Manchester City from Sheikh Mansour is visible. The investment in Manchester United is not visible. We didn't get value for money in players. And we've squandered so much of that money. Like, people like to bring up the fact that we spent £1 billion. Well, there isn't £1 billion worth of talent on the pitch. Lukaku's part of that billion. Di Maria is part of that billion. They're not playing. You know, Juan Mata and Nemanja Matic, big factors in that billion, not playing. Fellaini, not playing. A lot of these massive money signings that we've had in the last 10 years, not playing. Is that because they were, I mean, when you lurch from Fergie to Moyes to Louis to Mourinho to Ole, like, you're just seeing different philosophies and mindsets just chopping back and forward. Manchester City had a director of football and a plan, which ultimately culminated in them bringing in Guardiola. Now, let's say Ralph becomes a director upstairs, and let's say we don't appoint Julian Nagelsmann, but let's say that's who Ralph thinks should be the Manchester United manager in 4 or 5 years. What if he spent 4 or 5 years sowing those seeds in the football club, buying players that he thinks, you know, because you can't really consult someone like that. What if he buys players that he thinks suit the sort of system he's intending on having Nagelsmann play for United? That sort of long-term preparation, that sort of long-term planning, it's the shade that Ralph Hasenhüttl will never sit under and enjoy. But it's the sort of long-term efficient planning that would see you not squander. If we're going to play an on-the-floor possession-based system that relies on fast transitions, counter-attacking, and pressing from the front, no one's signing Fellaini. No one's signing Schweinsteiger. No one's signing Zlatan. No one's signing Cristiano Ronaldo. And what happens is you start to see your philosophy take shape in your signings. You can't build a philosophy in a summer. It has to take 4, 5, 6 years before you really start to see it come to fruition. Sir Alex started to dismantle his great side 2000, 2002 sort of time. And in that time, we transitioned from having the likes of York, Cole, Sheringham, David Beckham, Jaap Stam, Ronnie Johnson, Peter Schmeichel, all as mainstays of the team. We had a couple of errors with goalkeepers, but obviously Sir Alex was correctly afforded the time, to be able to make those mistakes until he eventually landed on Edwin van der Sar. He was allowed to go through trialing Sylvester and Blanc before he hit upon Rio Ferdinand, and he was allowed to trial him with the likes of Wes Brown and others at centre-half before he was able to hit on Nemanja Vidic. He tried numerous people, including Jemba and Kleberson in central midfield before we found and identified Michael Carrick. There were some things that he got right straight off the bat, Ronaldo, Rooney. But these were all long-term things that were maybe not quite ripe when we signed them and had to be added and developed and taken to the next level. If Manchester United are going to compete long-term, you have to think long-term. Short-term isn't going to work. It's expensive. It's not value for money. You're not going to see... Here's the thing. It's like going out and spending $1 million on lottery tickets hoping to win 5 million. You might. But you might lose all your money. If you can't, You can't go and compete short term because you're gambling on teams gelling, teams understanding that philosophy, and it just working without having to work for it. And it's that Instagram mentality that Manchester United have got. That Instagram mentality of we want everything immediately and we're not prepared to work for it. We're going out and hiring private jet photo shoots and then sitting in economy class rather than thinking about how we can work our way to being in a private jet. A mixture of hiring the wrong managers, backing them incorrectly, then sacking them has resulted in a squad filled with players from multiple different managers. You've now got De Gea and Jones from the Sir Alex era. Moyes has still got Juan Mata as his sole representative. You've got Shaw from the Van Gaal era, Lindelof and others from the Jose Mourinho era. Obviously, everyone that Ollie signed, bar Dan James, is still there. And that's resulted in a patchwork quilt of a squad. It's a squad made in no man's image. It's a horse made by council. It's a fucking camel. A big clear out is required. And I actually thought, to his credit, Solskjaer was undertaking that with some gusto. The Glazers take money out of the club annually in dividends and are therefore clearly not interested in winning. They're interested in keeping the cow on life support so they can milk it. How can a club that is set up to make money even compete with teams that are set up to win at all cost? Sheikh Mansour's signing checks without looking at them. Soon you're going to have Newcastle doing that on an industrial scale. Chelsea might be a different story and they could be about to really hit hard times, hopefully. But there's no guarantee of that. We can't appoint Ralph, a man that's proven he can build clubs, into a higher position within the club to advise us if we're not going to listen to him. It's clear that he's going to suggest reform when it comes to structures, but he has to be listened to. I don't know if this is the most crucial time in the decade since Sir Alex, because it feels like there's been so many new dawns and so many new opportunities that we've fluffed our lines on time and time again. But there is a new beginning. Richard Arnold's taking the helm. There seems to have been staff changes throughout, internally. He seems like he's canvassing opinion of people. Let's hope that he becomes more educated and more informed and less arrogant than his predecessor. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And it's the same with the next manager. Ten Hag might come in. And he might have certain demands. And he might want 6 or 7 new first-team players. If we give him 3, he will not be a success. If he doesn't get the requirements that he wants to develop the players in the academy system who've got undoubted talent, it ain't going to work. You can get rid of Deadwood. And it's expensive and long to do so. Ollie did all right. Smalling, Sanchez, Lukaku, Young. But there were so many. There has to be patience. We have to plant trees that we're not going to see grow. We have to do it knowing it's the right thing to do. Knowing that for the future of the football club to be a long-term success, we have to plant the correct seeds at the correct time. You can't keep making the wrong appointments and getting away with it. At the core, the Glazers and Ed Woodward are the ones. Apparently Ed Woodward's getting some sort of advisory role. Has he actually even left the building? His resignation seemed like a load of old arse at the time. On the face of things, the qualifications for Richard Arnold are exactly the same as Ed Woodward. The only thing that we can do is sit and wait and see if he becomes a success. Be open-minded about what he can bring. He's certainly canvassing the right people. There's some rumours that he's close enough to ask Sir Alex Ferguson his opinion on things. Seems like he's also doing the same with David Gill. I believe that can only be a positive. And for all the people who said, well, Fergie chose David Moyes, yeah, Fergie did a lot of things for this football club. And I'll tell you this, I would rather have Sir Alex Ferguson make 100 wrong decisions in a row or give his opinion and be wrong 100 times in a row than I would to trust Ed Woodward to tell me what fucking time it was. Sir Alex is the greatest manager Manchester United have ever seen, perhaps the greatest English footballers ever seen, and certainly one of the greatest the world has ever seen. His opinion, for me, holds so much more weight than Woodward or Richard Arnold. Hopefully Richard Arnold sees sense and does talk to him. He's not going to get everything right, but you can't discount his opinions. For me, unless there's an enormous overhaul, a shift in focus, a shift in mentality, and a development of a win at all costs mentality, we might as well start looking for the next manager after the one we're about to appoint straight away. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, five-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.